The final part of the prophet. Amos dreamed that night, a waking dream as he walked beneath the stars. And what do you see, Amos? A basket full of ripe fruit, fruit ready to be eaten. The 10 tribes were ripe for punishment. The singing in the temples of Israel would turn into wailing. Dead bodies would be scattered everywhere. The survivors would be taken out of the city in silence. The 10 wayward tribes would be led away into slavery. Even the land would suffer because of them. Israel first, then Judah. Wailing, Amos sank to his knees and threw dust in the air. He raged against the people's sins and grieved through the night. In the morning, he got up from the dust and walked back to Bethel. You can't come in, prophet. You heard the orders yesterday. These walls will not protect you from the judgment of God. Go away and don't make trouble for me. Listen to the message that the Lord has spoken, Amos shouted up at all the people on the wall. Listen to this, you who rob the poor and trample down the needy. You can't wait for the Sabbath day to be over and the religious festivals to end so you can get back to cheating the helpless. All day, Amos walked along the walls of Bethel. The day of the Lord will come unexpectedly, like a thief in the night. In that day, says the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth while it is still day. I will turn your celebrations into times of mourning and your singing into weeping. You will wear funeral clothes and shave your heads to show your sorrow, as if your only son had died. How very bitter that day will be. Throat raw, Amos stared up at the walls. Tears ran down his cheeks at the thought of the destruction to come. The Spirit of the Lord renewed his strength and gave power to his voice as he warned them of the worst curse that could come upon man. The time is surely coming, says the sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread or water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. Sobbing, Amos tore his robes. People will stagger from sea to sea and wander from border to border, searching for the word of the Lord, but they will not find it. Beautiful girls and strong young men will grow faint in that day, thirsting for the Lord's word. He pointed to the people lining the walls on either side of the main gates, and those who swear by the shameful idols of Samaria, who take oaths in the name of the God of Dan and make vows in the name of the God of Beersheba, they will all fall down, never to rise again. A rock struck him in the forehead and he fell. Blood poured down his face. He wiped it away and pushed himself up. Another stone and another. Pain licked through his shoulder and his side. Amos backed away from the walls. Are you Israelites more important to me than the Ethiopians? Asked the Lord. I brought Israel out of Egypt, but I also brought the Philistines from Crete and led the Armenians out of Kir, said the sovereign Lord. I am watching this sinful nation of Israel. I will destroy it from the face of the earth. Amaziah stood in the shadows, shouting, We will not listen to you any longer. Close the gate. The merchants protested. He could hear them arguing. No one cared about hearing the word of the Lord. They only fought to reopen the gate so that commerce could continue. Amos turned away, head throbbing, and staggered down the hill. Coming at last to a quiet orchard, he collapsed. Awakening in the middle of the night, Amos managed to make his way to the sheepfold cave where he had lived for 10 years. Hungry and thirsty, he fell on the hard-packed earth and curled up like a babe in the womb. Would he die here like an animal in its hole? Lord, why have you abandoned me? I tried to feed your sheep. They would not partake. Broken in spirit, he sobbed. Throat raw, lips cracked and bleeding, he whispered, You are God, and there is no other. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He dreamed that angels came and gave him bread and water while God whispered to him like a father to a troubled child, Be still and know that I am God. The pain went away and Amos's body relaxed beneath the ministering hands. Abba, Abba, why wouldn't they listen to me? He heard weeping. Release came and another task with freedom. Tomorrow he would go home to Tekoa and write all the visions the Lord had given him. He would make a copy for Israel and another for Judah. The indictment would be on scrolls so that when the Lord fulfilled his word, the people would know he had warned them before sending his judgment. The 11 miles to Tekoa felt like 100, but the sight of the fields and flocks of sheep filled Amos with joy. He spotted Elkanah and Ithiel and the pastures, but he could not raise his arm or call out to them. Elkanah studied him. Ithiel approached, staff and club in hand. You there? Who are you and what do you want? He had changed so much in his appearance. Swaying, Amos dropped to his knees. Ithiel hurried toward him. When Amos lifted his head, Ithiel's eyes went wide. Uncle! Dropping his club, he put his arms around him. Let me help you, he shouted. Elkanah, it's Uncle Amos. Call for help. I will be all right. I just need to rest here for a while. When Amos looked out at the sheep, his throat closed, hot and thick. Why couldn't Israel be drawn together and led back to the Lord? Why couldn't they graze on the scriptures rather than eat the poisonous teachings of men like Jeroboam and Amaziah and Heled? Amos is back. Hush, Amos shook his head. Don't frighten the sheep. His voice broke. If only God's sheep were frightened of what was to come. If only they could be called back. Others came to help Elkanah reached him for him, tears running freely as he looped his arm gently around Amos and helped him walk. Amos smiled. My friend, I need you to purchase reed pens, a full inkhorn, a small knife, and a roll of papyrus right away. I will, Amos. Amos slept for 3 days. Finally, he rose, stiff and aching, and set to work on the scroll. The word of the Lord flowed from him, the Spirit of the Lord helping him to remember every word God had spoken. When his emotions rose too high, he left the work briefly and paced so that his tears would not stain the document. Eliakim sat down a tray with a jug and some wine and some bread and a bowl of thick lentil stew. You must eat. Amos did so. Replete, he returned to his work. Eliakim came to get the tray and bowl. Will the Lord send you back to Israel? I don't know. He was not the same man who had left Tekoa years ago. I will go wherever the Lord sends me. His heart still ached for the Israelites. Much has changed in Jerusalem since the earthquake. Uzziah lives in solitude. Jotham carries out his commands. Did the king repent? Yes. And the people? He thought of his brothers, their wives and young ones. Have they returned to the Lord? Many have. His servant's hesitance grieved Amos. My brothers? Eliakim shrugged. It appears so. Out of obligation or thanksgiving? Amos had not had the heart to ask. He prayed that his brothers bowed down willingly to the Lord and could rejoice in their salvation. He worked day by day, carefully writing the first scroll. There must be no mistakes. When he finished writing the visions, the Lord spoke to him again, and the word he gave filled Amos with hope for those who trusted in the Lord. He finished writing, left the table, and went outside. Raising his arms in praise to the God who had called him away from the fields and flocks, he thought of the future and hope God had offered his people. In that day, I will restore the fallen house of David. I will repair its damaged walls. From the ruins, I will rebuild it and restore its former glory. I will bring my exiled people of Israel back from distant lands, and they will rebuild their ruined cities and live in them again. They will plant vineyards and gardens. They will eat their crops and drink their wine. I will firmly plant them there in their own land. All would not be lost. God always left a remnant. Amos went back to his writing table and over the next weeks made 2 perfect copies of the scroll. The first he sent by messenger to King Jeroboam in Samaria, the second to King Uzziah in Jerusalem. and the third he placed in Eliakim's trustworthy hands. Keep this safe, lest the others be destroyed. Some men would do anything to pretend God did not speak or warn of what was to come. His work was done. Amos went out to examine the flocks. He saw the increase that had come from Eliakim and Ithai's care over the last 10 years, and he was pleased. Much had changed during his absence, and dismayed, Amos had to accept that his sheep no longer recognized his voice. The lamb he had tended had grown old. The animals moved at the sound of Eliakim's and Ithai's voices, but they didn't come when Amos called. Like the Israelites, they had forgotten their master's voice. They no longer knew or trusted him. Working with his nephews, Amos allowed the animals time to become familiar with his voice. When they finally answered to his voice, he took a portion of the flock to another pasture. He walked among them and talked softly to them. Some inclined their ears, others did not. At night, with the howl of wolves, he played his reed pipe or sang to them. The sound of his presence helped the sheep rest while he kept keeping the predators away. Even after weeks away from Bethel, he often thought of the people there and what the future held for them. Should I go back, Lord? Should I try again? How like wayward sheep they are. They don't know your voice or see your presence all around them. The 10 tribes did not know God was close, ever watchful, trying to protect them from harm. They rejected the gift of salvation. They refused to be led to safety, rejecting an abundance of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Did they even guess at the sorrow they caused God by their adultery with other gods? Gods empty and false, mere reflections of their own inner depravity. Their false gods would lead them to slavery and death. Amos prayed unceasingly. Every thought that came into his mind he captured and turned to the Lord. He wanted to be cleansed of all the iniquity he had seen in Bethel, the sins that had spread through the 10 tribes like a plague. Death would come when they least expected it, like a thief in the night. He grieved over Judah, too, for he had returned to Jerusalem and seen his brothers, and he knew their repentance did not run deep. Amos prayed for Isaiah's words to echo through the land and turn the people away from sin. Make them listen, Lord. He brought his flock back to the fold in Tekoa. Eliakim came out to help him. King Jeroboam is dead. Amos heard the news in silence. Dread filled him. So it begins. Eliakim told him the rest. His son, Zechariah, is to rule. The last sheep entered the fold. Amos closed the gate securely and bowed his head in grief. Not for long. The next morning, Amos led his sheep out the gate and into the east pasture. Leaning on his staff, he watched the rams and ewes rush to fresh grasses while the lambs cavorted playfully. He smiled. This was the life he knew best, the life he loved. He knew sheep, but he could never fathom men. He thought of Bethel and Israel and prayed for the people who had persecuted him. How little pleasure you get from your flock, Lord. You cry out for your lost children to come home, only to have them run in the opposite direction. Often Amos's sheep wandered. Did that mean he loved them less? Did it mean he would turn his back on them if there was any chance to save them? I am but a man, thought Amos, and I love them until my heart feels as though it will break. How much greater is your love? It runs deeper, it's more pure, it's holy. Your love runs like living water, unseen, beyond comprehension, beneath the surface of what we see and hear. Faith stretches toward it and drinks so that we might grow strong and upright, a tree of life to all of us. Amos! Startled, Amos straightened and glanced up. The sheep moved, frightened by the stranger among them. Amos called them back and moved between the flock and the man approaching. Grinning, he spread his arms. Hosea! They embraced. Hosea drew back. I went to Tekoa. Your servant said you would be here. You came 5 miles to see me? I would have walked farther. Touched, Amos leaned on his staff and smiled faintly. You look well and prosperous. Hosea bowed his head. The Lord has blessed our family. My father is performing priestly duties and receives his portion. Ah, yes. And all it took was an earthquake to make men turn their eyes back to the law of God. He saw this was no idle visit. What brings you to me? God has called me back to Israel, Amos. Now? Yes. Amos sighed heavily. I hope you will find listening ears and open hearts, my young friend. Hosea bowed his head. God has told me to marry a prostitute. Amos stared at him. Are you certain God is the one speaking to you? Hosea lifted his eyes. When you were called, was there any doubt in your mind that it was God who spoke to you? No, I knew his voice instantly, though I'd never heard it before. Everything within me recognized him. Amos gave a faint smile. I did not welcome him. I begged him to leave me alone. I feared the task. I told him I would not be up to it. He looked north, and I wasn't. The grief welled again, deep as an ocean. They refused to listen. You spoke the truth, Amos. You warned them of the destruction coming, and now God is sending me back to live a life filled with pain. Hosea's shoulders sagged. My father thinks I yearn for Israel's ways. He thinks I want to return to Bethel so I can revel in the pleasure of women. He refuses to speak to me, Amos. I've never lain with a woman. Never. I've waited in hope of finding a God-fearing Hebrew girl who would be the mother of my children. His eyes filled. And now God tells me to go and marry a prostitute? How can I love such a woman? How can she love me? What else did God say to you? He swallowed hard and looked away. He remained silent so long, Amos thought he would not answer. Israel is like an unfaithful wife, but God is ever faithful, as I must be. Is this the way of it, Lord? Hosea will be the faithful husband to an adulterous wife, the husband who cherishes his bride only to see her run to other men? What suffering this young man will experience, and all to show God's anguish? Hosea will show them how you suffer when your people embrace other gods. Will the people even know what they see, Lord? Will they understand the depth of your passion for them? Fear didn't turn them back to you. Will love do what fear could not? You extend your hand yet again, Lord. For just a moment, Amos felt God's anguish over his chosen people. I don't want to go back to Bethel, Amos. I want to stay in Jerusalem and immerse myself in the study of the law. And you think you will be safe from harm there? Amos shook his head. Hosea struggled as he had. Wasn't every day a struggle to obey God rather than to do as he pleased? The only safe place is in God's will, my friend. He put his hand on Hosea's shoulder. And the Lord is with you. That is worth everything. Perhaps we're called to be like Job and be able to speak his words from our heart. God might kill me, but I have no other hope. But doesn't the Lord suffer all the more? He loves us like a father loves a child, only more so. They walked together. Amos told him the way of a shepherd and pointed out the different sheep and their personalities. Hosea laughed and shook his head. It occurred to Amos that he was instructing Hosea that all of creation taught about the character of God. Everything has a lesson. But how many took time to look and listen? How many understood that to seek after God brought wonder and joy to a life and made all the other things pass away? I have loved the shepherd's life, Lord. I have loved being alone in the pasture lands, drinking in your creation, watching over your sheep. Unlike life in Bethel amid the mess and chaos of humanity, life is simple here. People are complex and yet simple. They want their own way. They fashion idols and they think allow them to descend into dark passions and self-centered existence. They use creative abilities you gave them to make new gods that can neither punish nor rescue them. For a while, I saw them as sheep, but they are even more foolish and bent on destruction than these animals. Is this love I feel for them even a spark of what you have felt from the beginning? You are the shepherd on high, calling out to us, come home, come back to me, return to the fold where you will be safe and loved. You sing songs of deliverance every day through the wind, the birds, the night sounds. If only we would listen. We must go wherever God sends us, Hosea. If God called him back to Israel, Amos would not argue this time. He would go without hesitation. He would speak again, though it would mean beatings, imprisonment, and even death. How had God brought him to this point of surrender, stubborn, wayward man that he had been? Israel had not turned back from rebellion, but the Lord had done a mighty work in him. Hosea walked head down. What if the Lord has told me what the Lord has told me to do is against everything in me? And in the midst of it, the Lord will be with you. You will learn to pour compassion on the one who hates you. Hosea's eyes glistened with tears. And will I destroy the one I love in the end, as God says he will destroy us? Amos paused and leaned heavily on his staff. He was a simple man, not a philosopher, a shepherd, not a priest with years of study behind his opinions. I don't know the answers, Hosea, but in the years I spent in Bethel, I knew it was not God's hatred of men that sent me there, but his great love. It is sin he hates because sin kills. Sin separates us from God, and he wants us close, in his fold. He looked out over his flock. Sometimes it's the simple act of grazing that gets a sheep into trouble. Nibble a little here, a little there, a little more over in another area, and pretty soon they're far from the shepherd. And then a lion comes, or wolves. How many times over the centuries has God rescued us from our own stupidity? He shook his head. Too many times to count. Will we never learn, Lord? Will our hearts never change? Would you have to make us into new creatures for us to follow you? He went after a sheep who headed for some brush. Hosea watched. When the sheep was safely back among the others, Amos returned to him. A shepherd sometimes has to discipline a wayward sheep. Some are bent on going their own way. They will go into gullies and into brambles and lead others to death right along with them. I've had to kill a few sheep to keep the rest safe, as God will a few of us. More than a few, my friend. How can God love us so much and yet unleash cruel, despotic enemies on us? I've asked the same question, Hosea, and I have no answers, but I know this. The fault of much of what is coming upon us is due to our own choices. We worshipped out of habit. We gave because it was required in order to do business. In our ignorance, we equated corrupt priests with God, or I did. We are destroyed by our own ignorance, and yet how few have the desire to learn the truth that will save them. Amos sighed. But I talk about things I don't know or understand. If I could explain everything, would God be God? I never stood before the people of Bethel and spoke my own ideas. I spoke only the words God gave me. Anything else would have been sin. I hated the people in the beginning. In truth, I preferred the company of the sheep to men. Sights, the sounds, the smells of Bethel's populace assaulted me from every side. It took a few years for God to pry open my eyes so that I could see them as lost sheep. He shook his head. Some things will be beyond our understanding. Even the animals know their owner and appreciate his care, but not God's people. No matter what he does for them, they still refuse to understand. Does a sheep tell a shepherd what to do? Why should a man feel he can tell God what to do? But the impossibility of it all doesn't stop our people from trying. God won't let man have his way, so he carves an idol of wood or stone, props it up, and bows down to it. And his God has all the power of a scarecrow guarding a field of melons. I wanted my way for a long time, Hosea, but God had his way with me in the end. His eyes filled with tears, and I thank God for it. I thank God every day. But God is sending us with such different messages. Is he? Are they really that different? Surely salvation is near to those who honor him. God's unfailing love and truth are one, and a life lived in striving for righteousness brings peace. Not always. Amos knew Hosea meant to remind him of the ways in which he had suffered during his 10 years in Bethel. Is it peace with men that matters most, my friend, or peace with God? I told the people the consequences of sin. Perhaps it is your work to show God's grace and mercy if they repent. I don't think I can do what he asks. You can't. Neither could I. I'm a shepherd. I tend sheep and prune sycamore figs. Who would think me equipped or even worthy to preach God's word in Bethel? Yet God made it so. I could say or do nothing until the Spirit of the Lord came upon me, and then anything was possible. God will make it possible for you to do the task he's given you. Your work is to trust him. Will you go back to Bethel with me? Amos saw the hope and fear in Hosea's eyes. He shook his head. No, this is where God wants me for now. Hosea would have to rely on the Lord to complete his mission, and the Lord would be there with him at all times. Hosea smiled ruefully. I didn't think you'd agree, Amos, but I had to ask. No man wants to be alone. You won't be. Hosea understood and nodded. I will remember you, your courage, your obedience. I will remember what you said and heed well the warning. And I will pray for you and continue to pray for all those you were sent to serve. They embraced. You call your prophets to a hard life of pain and suffering, Lord. The Spirit moved within him, and Amos knew God suffered far more than any man could imagine. The one who created man, the one who molded and loved him into existence, was treated like a cast-off lover. You suffer more, Father, for your love is greater. Amos's throat tightened. He bowed his head. Oh, may the words of my heart be pleasing to you, Lord, for you are my shepherd. When he raised his head, Amos looked north and saw Hosea standing on the top of the hill. They raised hands to one another, and then Hosea disappeared over the horizon. Israel refused to heed the warnings. Would they also scorn love? Tears ran down Amos's cheeks, for he knew the answer. Amos brought the flocks back to Tekoa and wintered them in the protected pastures and shelters of home. Leaving his trusted servants in charge, he went up to Jerusalem to worship in the temple and visit his brothers. Benai told him the news. King Zechariah has been assassinated in Samaria. Ahiam poured feed into the manger. He was struck down in his capital right in front of the people, and his assassin, Shallum, is now king of Israel. The word of the Lord given to Jehu all those years ago had been fulfilled, and Jeroboam's dynasty had not lasted past the fourth generation. In fact, Zechariah lasted only 6 months, and no other member of the family of Jeroboam remained alive to retake power from the uncrowned usurper. Within a month, Amos heard from a merchant passing through Tekoa on his way to Jerusalem that Shallum had been executed and still another king was on the throne of Israel. Menahem refused to bow down to an assassin, so he came up to Samaria from Tisra, killed Shallum, and crowned himself king of Israel. And so a terrorist always claims a noble excuse for murder. Having turned away from the loving kindness of God, the people now lived under the shadow of a murderer, and worse would come. With each day that passed, Amos's sense of foreboding grew. He had killed a lion 4 days ago and heard wolves last night, but there was something else, something even more ominous in the air. He kept the sheep close, his gaze moving to any disturbance. A man came over the hill. Amos raised his hand to shade his eyes. It was not Elkanan or Ithion or Eliakim. The man kept walking toward Amos with purposeful strides. When Amos recognized him, he knew why he'd come. Harry! Greetings, prophet. Strange that fear should leave him now. Amos inclined his head, his mouth curving in a bleak smile. How does your father fare these days? My father is the one who sent me. Hari drew a sword. Amos faced far worse than this arrogant young braggart. He could easily have defended himself with his club, but he did nothing. What do you think you will accomplish by murdering me? Your prophecies die with you. Our family will remain in power, and you will be food for the buzzards. Amos grasped the one last opportunity given him to speak truth. You're wrong. Amos dropped his staff and club and spread his arms. Kill me if you think you must, but know this. Men plan, but God prevails. The word of the Lord will stand, and everything will happen just as God had me say it. Perry cried out in rage and thrust his sword into Amos's stomach. He leaned forward, using both hands to push the blade all the way through and then let go and stepped back. Amos couldn't breathe through the pain. He looked down and grasped the bloody hilt and sank to his knees. Who holds the power now? Perry ground out. Uttering a guttural cry of rage, he put his heel to Amos's chest and shoved him back. The blade thrust upward, slicing Amos's hands. He lay on his back, writhing in pain. This is what you get for making a better man than you suffer. My father will be able to sleep now, and he will be able to eat. He will no longer fear your words ringing in his ears. Standing over him, Perry pulled the sword out slowly. Amos cried out in agony and saw that Perry relished it. He knelt at Amos's side. Leaning over, he gave a feral grin, eyes black with triumph. I'm going to leave you here now to suffer. Pray you die before a lion comes, or the wolves. It gives me pleasure to think about your flesh being torn by hungry animals. He stood, spit on him, and cursed him by the gods of Bethel. After kicking dust into Amos's face, he walked away. Perry scooped up a handful of rocks, flung them at Amos's sheep, and laughed as they ran in panic. Amos tried to rise and couldn't. When he turned his head, he saw the sheep scattering. Tears filled his eyes. He cried in pain and despair as the sun set and his lifeblood soaked into the ground. He heard the wolves and saw them gathering on the hillside. The sheep moved restlessly, no shepherd to guide or protect them, like Israel. And the nations will gather around the hills of Samaria. Amos wept. By your mercy, I will not live to see it happen. His father once said to him that the righteous often pass away before their time because the Lord protects those he loves from the evil that has to come. A wolf came close, crouching low, growling. Amos was helpless to protect himself. His strength was gone. The wolf came a foot closer and then bolted away, frightened by something unseen. A gentle breeze stirred the grass. It would be night soon. Darkness was closing in. Amos felt himself lifted by strong arms. He looked into the face he had never seen before, and yet his soul recognized. Oh! Joy filled him, and he kept his eyes fixed on the one he loved. Do not fear. Tears fell upon Amos's face. All that has been said will come to pass, and then I will restore the fallen house of David. I will rebuild its ruins and restore it so that the rest of humanity might see me, including the Gentiles, all those who have been called to be mine. The hope of salvation filled Amos, but he had not the strength left even to smile. The Lord kissed his forehead. Rest, Amos. Rest, my good and faithful servant. Amos closed his eyes as the good shepherd carried him home.